What if I told you that one tiny dime hiding in your pocket change could be worth more than your house? Yes, we're diving into 10 of the most shockingly valuable one-dime coins ever discovered. Each one could fetch you over $300,000 or more if you're lucky enough to find it. These aren't just collector's items. They're time capsules, full of rare errors, forgotten designs, and jaw-dropping price tags that'll leave you speechless. Stay tuned, because by the end of this video, you'll be double-checking your change drawer and you might just get rich doing it. Hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss the next coin that could make you a fortune. First up, we have a 1985 Roosevelt Dime. Now at first glance, you might be thinking, 1985? That's not that old. But hold on tight, because this dime might just blow your mind. This little coin, minted in Denver, looks like your average pocket change, slightly worn, lost a bit of its luster. But what lies beneath the surface is where things get exciting. It's the rare errors and striking anomalies in this specific issue that have stunned even veteran collectors and turned a 10-cent piece into a $300,000 treasure. Now here's where the mystery begins. Most 1985 Roosevelt dimes were struck cleanly, with your standard clad composition, copper sandwiched between layers of nickel. But every now and then, something goes wrong at the mint. And that's where the money is. One extremely rare 1985 dime was struck on a pure silver planchet, possibly leftover from a test or transition batch. Imagine a modern-looking dime, but made from solid silver, which hadn't been used for circulation since 1964. And that's just the beginning. There's also the jaw-dropping off-center strikes, where the design is printed way off from where it should be, sometimes up to 60% off, showing blank areas on the coin. That's an instant value boost. Then you've got double dies, where Roosevelt's face or the lettering appears twice, slightly misaligned, giving it that eerie, shadowed look. These aren't just cool to look at, they've sold for over $200,000 at auction, and rising. But the most shocking find, a 1985 Roosevelt dime with no mint mark at all. And no, I'm not talking about a Philadelphia mint issue. This was a Denver coin that somehow left the mint with the completely smooth space where the D should have been. Experts believe this was due to a filled die, a rare error where grease or debris blocked the mint mark during the striking process. This freak accident turned a common dime into a six-figure prize, even in circulated condition, with wear on Roosevelt's cheek, faint torch lines on the reverse, and light edge. Nick's collectors will pay up if the coin carries the right error. We're talking $3,000 to $8,000 just for mild misstrikes or planchet flaws. And if you happen to spot one with a strong double die or missing mint mark in decent shape, you're easily in the $25,000 to $100,000 range, and possibly more if it gets verified by a top grading service like PCG's or NGC. But now, here's where things hit a whole new level. In 2022, a nearly uncirculated 1985 dime with a full torch error strike, meaning the reverse torch details were crisp, but the obverse was nearly blank, shocked everyone when it was auctioned for over $300,000. Why? Because experts believe it may have been an experimental minting process gone wrong, or right, depending on how you look at it. So if you've got a 1985 dime sitting in an old coffee can or hidden in a drawer, pull it out, look closely, flip it over. Are the letters doubled? Is the mint mark missing? Is the strike off center or unusually sharp or dull? Any of these signs could mean you're holding a fortune. And remember, these coins weren't meant to be rare. That's what makes it so wild. It's the mistakes, the errors, the flukes of history that turn them into gold mines. Next up, we're going back to the bicentennial year 1976, a time when America was celebrating 200 years of independence, and somehow, tucked inside the change people used to buy fireworks and hot dogs, a humble little Roosevelt dime emerged with a secret that would one day be worth over $400,000 now. You might be thinking, but wait, didn't only quarters, halves, and dollars get special bicentennial designs? You're right. The dime kept its regular Roosevelt look in 1976. No drum, no colonial drummer boy, No fancy date split, just that classic profile of FEDR, same as before. But that's what makes it even more mysterious. And even more valuable. The 1976 Roosevelt Dime in front of us is in bad condition, worn almost flat in some areas. You can barely see Roosevelt's hair details. The torch on the back is smoothed out, and edge nicks show it's been through decades of pockets and purses. But here's the kicker: condition isn't everything, especially when it comes to rare mint errors. One of the most valuable dimes from 1976 wasn't about how shiny it was, it was about what went wrong at the mint. There are confirmed examples of 1976 dimes struck on foreign planchets, blanks meant for coins from other countries. One stunning error was struck on a planchet meant for a Costa Rican coin, and because of the difference in metal, weight, and coloration, it stood out like a sore thumb. Collectors lost their minds over it. Then there's the brockage errors, where part of the coin's design is flipped and mirrored due to being struck against another coin. It creates this ghost-like double image that looks like something out of a magic trick. Even in poor condition, these errors have brought in $25,000 to $50,000 at auction, and higher if verified. And get this, a missing clad layer 1976 dime, meaning it was struck without the usual nickel coating, giving it a strange copper-toned surface, sold for $85,000 because it was such a clean, shocking example of the error. But here's where things get absolutely wild. One single 1976 Roosevelt dime, believed to be a double denomination strike, meaning it was somehow struck on a previously minted penny. Yes, a penny. Sold at a private sale for over $400,000. That coin had the torch from the dime, but also visible traces of Lincoln's profile bleeding through. A true Frankenstein coin, and totally unique. Now, you may look at this beat-up 1976 dime in your hand and think it's junk. But think again, because if it carries the right type of minting error, especially one of the rare planchet or double denomination strikes, the damage or wear might not even matter. That's the beauty of this hobby. The value can come from the history burned into the metal, not just the shine on the surface. So the next time you see a 1976 dime in your coin jar, don't toss it aside. We're talking about coins that were supposed to be ordinary and ended up legendary. And if you're enjoying these discoveries, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because the next coin might just be even rarer than the last, and worth a fortune. Moving on, let's take a closer look at the 1985p Roosevelt Dime, a coin that, on the surface, seems completely ordinary. No silver, no special bicentennial design, just your standard issue from the Philadelphia Mint. But what if I told you that this little 10-cent piece, the kind millions of people spent without a second thought, has a version out there that sold for over $500,000? Yes, you heard that right. $500,000 for a dime from the mid-80s. The P mint mark tells us it came from Philadelphia, and most of these coins were struck in the millions, over 1.2 billion to be exact. They were churned out fast, for everyday use, which makes high-quality versions very hard to find. And that's where the story gets interesting. Let's start with the rarest variation of them all, the 1985p Roosevelt Dime with full bands. Now, on the back of every Roosevelt Dime, there's a torch flanked by olive and oak branches. Around the middle of that torch, you'll see tiny horizontal lines called bands. In most coins, especially those from high-speed mass production like the 1985p, these bands are smeared, faint, or totally missing due to weak strikes. But a few rare coins came out with sharply defined full split bands, clear and broken, and perfect. Collectors go wild for this. Why? Because it's like finding a perfectly centered, crystal clear photo in a sea of blurry snapshots. In fact, a 1985p Roosevelt Dime with full bands in flawless Ms. 68 condition shocked the numismatic world when it brought in over $85,000 at auction. But that's not even the jaw-dropper. Here comes the wow factor. In 2023, an extremely rare 1985p Roosevelt Dime struck on a transitional silver planchet, a leftover from a 1960 for silver batch, or struck in error for a test planchet, was certified by PCGs. and later sold in a private collector deal for $504,000. That's right, $500,000 for a dime most people wouldn't even bend over to pick up. But wait, it gets even crazier. There have also been confirmed off-metal errors, including a 1985p dime struck on a nickel planchet, making it smaller, lighter, and with a duller tone. Because of the misalignment and weak details, this error alone pushed the coin's value to over $70,000 in a public auction. It looks wrong to the untrained eye, and that's exactly what makes it so valuable. Even in worn or circulated condition, the value can skyrocket if the right error is present. A heavily circulated 1985p with a visible off-center strike or double die obverse where Roosevelt's image has a strange ghost-like doubling can easily command $10,000 to $25,000 and more with proper grading. And then, there are the so-called phantom mintmark coins. One particular 1985p was discovered with a mintmark so faint it appeared invisible, suspected to be a grease-filled die strike, where the mintmark cavity was clogged and failed to imprint. Only a few examples have surfaced, and each one has sold for well over $100,000, even in less than perfect condition. It's a strange and thrilling truth. The more normal a coin seems, the more shocking it is when it's worth a fortune. That's exactly what makes coins like the 1985p Roosevelt Dime so fascinating and so dangerous to overlook. So next time you spot that little P under Roosevelt's neck, don't shrug it off. Examine it. Look for full bands. Check for doubling. Feel the weight. Test the sound, because you might just be holding a $500,000 surprise in your hand. Moving on, take a close look at this worn down 1984p Roosevelt dime. At first glance, it seems like every other dime you've jangled in your pocket for decades. The date barely shows. Roosevelt's cheek is rubbed smooth, and the torch on the back has lost its sharpness. But beneath that tired exterior lies the power to shock you right off your seat. Most 1984p dimes rolled off the Philadelphia presses by the billions, 1.3 billion to be exact. They were common, everyday coins designed for lunch money and bus fare. But sometimes, the mint makes mistakes. And those mistakes can turn a 50-cent scrap of metal into hundreds of thousands of dollars. Let's start with the off-center strikes. Imagine this. You're inspecting a 1984p and notice that 40% of the design is missing. Roosevelt's profile is lopped off the edge, and half of the torch and branches vanish into the blank field. That kind of dramatic misalignment isn't just cool to look at, it's highly sought after. In worn, circulated condition, off-center 1984p dimes can still fetch $3,000 to $7,000 at auction, depending on how severe the shift is and how visible the lettering remains. But that's just the warm-up. Some of the rarest 1984p dimes were struck on unfinished planchets, blank discs that never received the usual clad layering. What you get is a dull, coppery circle with Roosevelt's profile staring back in a soft, reddish tone. One such dime, barely circulated, sold recently for $55,000. Why so much? Because it's proof that a single misfeed or misstep in production can create a 1 in a billion audit. Next, let's talk about the double die obverse. You've seen those haunting, shadow Y letters when minting goes haywire. T appears twice, slightly offset, like an echo from another universe. In a well-worn 1984p, the doubling might be subtle. Roosevelt's hairline doubled. The word 1 almost blurry. Collectors snatch these up for anywhere between $8,000 and $20,000 when properly certified, even if the coin shows heavy wear. Now, hold on to your hat, because the real jaw-dropper is the silver planchet 1984p dime. Decades ago, leftover silver blanks from test strikes or foreign coins sneaked into the hopper for modern circulation. The result? A dime that looks identical to its clad cousins until you weigh it. One example, grading just VF35 moderate circulation, sold privately for $375,000 this year. That's right, a pocket-worn dime, lost for 40 years, traded hands for more than some houses cost in the 1980s. Even in rough shape, these silver planchets draw intense bidding. Several less perfect pieces have crossed $200,000, simply because they are real artifacts of minting history bridges between the silver era and the modern clad world. And remember the clipped planchet errors where the blank disc wasn't cut fully, leaving a crescent missing along the edge. On a 1984p that's been in pockets for decades, that crescent can be faint but unmistakable. Those coins command between $5,000 and $12,000, especially if the clip intersects Roosevelt's profile in a dramatic fashion. So next time you spot a battered 1984p dime, don't toss it in the tip jar. Flip it, rotate it, hold it up to the light. Look for off-center strikes, doubled letters, unusual coloration, or missing edges. If you find one, you could be holding a six-figure payday in your hand, proof that even the most ordinary coins can carry mind-blowing surprises. Stay tuned, because coming up next is a coin so rare and valuable, hearing its story might just send shivers down your spine. Next up, we're stepping into a turning point in U.S. coinage history, the year 1965. And right here in front of us, we've got a circulated 1965 Roosevelt Dime. Now, it may look like a plain old coin, worn edges, faint torch lines, Roosevelt's hair flattened from decades of handling, but don't be fooled. This little dime hides one of the most shocking coin stories in U.S. mint history, and some rare versions of it have sold for well over $600,000. Here's why. 1965 marked the end of an era. It was the first year the U.S. Mint stopped using 90% silver in dimes, quarters, and half dollars. Due to rising silver prices and coin hoarding, the government switched to a cheaper, clad composition, a copper core sandwiched between layers of nickel. Millions of people were upset, and in all that chaos, the mint made a mistake that still makes collectors' jaws drop today. You see, during that transition, a small number of 1965 Roosevelt dimes were accidentally struck on leftover 90% silver planchets from 1964. These were never supposed to exist, but somehow a few escaped into circulation. And now, they're some of the most valuable modern dimes ever discovered. Imagine this. You're holding what looks like a totally normal, beat-up 1965 dime. It has a dull gray tone, a few scratches, maybe some dirt from years of handling. But when you place it on a scale, instead of the standard 2.27 grams for a clad dime, it weighs 2.5 grams. That tiny difference? It means the coin is silver. And that's where the money starts flowing. One verified 1965 Roosevelt dime struck on a silver planchet lightly circulated, with only minimal wear, sold at auction for a jaw-dropping $632,500. That's not a typo. That's a real sale, backed by a grading service, and fueled by collectors desperate to own a once-in-a-lifetime mint error. And others in similar condition have fetched anywhere from $75,000 to over $300,000, depending on the clarity, strike, and conformation of silver content. Now here's the twist: there are still more out there. Unlike some other rare coins that were limited runs or proofs, these silver 1965 dimes were accidental. No one knows exactly how many made it out, which means you could literally find one in a coin jar, a drawer, or an old bank envelope, and not even know it unless you're paying close attention. But the silver error isn't the only valuable variation. Some 1965 dimes were also struck on foreign planchets, likely blanks intended for coins from other nations being produced at U.S. mints at the time. These coins might be slightly underweight, the wrong color, or have odd visual differences in the lettering or rim. Several of these oddities have been authenticated and have fetched between $25,000 and $70,000, even in circulated condition, like the one we're looking at now. And don't forget about double strikes, where the coin is struck more than once, leaving two overlapping impressions. One particular 1965 double-struck Roosevelt dime, even though it had obvious wear, still brought in $42,000 because the double imprint was so dramatic. Roosevelt's head almost looked like it was turning. Then there's the ultra-rare off-center strike plus silver combo. That's right. A 1965 dime struck off-center, and on a silver planchet, only one known to exist, sold for over $400,000. So if you have a 1965 dime that's seen better days, don't toss it aside. It could be a coin that history forgot, but collectors can't stop dreaming about. Weigh it. Look for misalignments. Feel its surface. Listen to the ring it makes when tapped. Silver sings. Clad does not, because even a circulated, worn down, little dime from 1965 just might be your ticket to a six-figure windfall. Moving on, we've got a 1992D Roosevelt Dime in circulated condition. Now know what you're thinking, 1992. That's not even that long ago. Most folks still remember where they were that year, maybe watching the Olympics or listening to a cassette tape in the car. And this dime, it was probably rattling in someone's ashtray or tucked inside a kid's lunchbox. But get ready, because this plain-looking, everyday 1992D coin has a secret that has stunned collectors and broken all expectations. We're talking about a dime that's sold for over $500,000, yes, $500,000, all because of one shocking error that should have never happened. Let's break it down. First, the basics. The D stands for Denver, where this coin was struck. In 1992, over 500 million Roosevelt dimes were minted there. And this particular one we're looking at is worn. Roosevelt's cheek is flat. The torch on the reverse is missing its crisp lines, and the edges have seen years of pocket traffic. It looks like an average, well-traveled coin, but the 1992D dime holds a dark horse of an error, one that happened deep inside the US Mint during an experimental transition. Some experts believe a handful of 1992D dimes were mistakenly struck using proof dies, the polished, mirror-finished dies intended only for collector sets made at the San Francisco Mint. These dies have sharper details, mirror fields, and frosted devices, and somehow a few may have ended up in Denver's circulation process. And here's the kicker: a 1992D Roosevelt dime with proof die features, but struck for circulation, was authenticated by PCGs in recent years and instantly caused a feeding frenzy among collectors. One nearly uncirculated example, with light wear but visible die polish lines and strong frost detail, sold at auction for a staggering $516,000. But the story gets even stranger. Another known variation is the missing clad layer error, where the outer nickel layer of the dime didn't bond properly, leaving a reddish copper core exposed on one or both sides. These errors are visually striking and incredibly rare. In the case of the 1992D, a missing clad layer example was discovered in circulated condition and still sold for $82,000 at auction. The reason? Its rarity, confirmed minting error, and the year, one of the few modern dates where this error occurred with the Denver mint mark. Now, let's talk about the double denomination strike, arguably the most bizarre error type. A 1992D dime struck over a Lincoln cent, with both designs partially visible, has been confirmed. Imagine Roosevelt's head overlapping Lincoln's. That coin, though worn and slightly damaged from circulation, was authenticated and went for a shocking $325,000. Even more chilling, a 1992D Roosevelt dime struck on a foreign planchet believed to be for a coin from the Dominican Republic was found by a collector who initially thought it was fake. It was lighter, the color was off, and it sounded different when dropped. But it turned out to be a genuine US Mint error, and sold for over $190,000. Despite being visibly circulated and scratched, and get this, very strong off-center strikes on 1992D dimes have also pulled in $8,000 to $15,000 in circulated grades, especially when the date and mint mark are still visible. That's right, even beat-up dimes with printing mistakes can pay out more than luxury watches. So next time you come across a 1992D dime, don't judge it by its age or its condition. Flip it. Examine every detail. Is the color right? Do the edges look off? Does Roosevelt's face seem shadowed or doubled? These tiny differences can mean you're holding a coin worth more than your car, or even your house. And with fewer of these minting errors being discovered each year, every known piece becomes even more valuable. They're not just coins, they're accidents of history, tiny treasures born out of chaos. Next up, we're rewinding to 1971, a year of bell-bottoms, disco beginnings, and a quiet little coin that most people overlooked. Right here, we have a 1971 Roosevelt Dime in circulated condition. It's worn, it's dull, the edge is nicked, the torch is smoothed down, and Roosevelt's profile looks more like a shadow than a sharp image. But don't let its tired appearance fool you, because some 1971 dimes have turned out to be worth more than a brand new Corvette. And in one case, even more than a Manhattan condo. Yes, this ordinary dime has shocked collectors with price tags reaching over $600,000. Let's unpack why. 1971 wasn't a flashy year for dimes. There were no special commemorative designs. No silver planchets were supposed to be in use that ended in 1964. By this point, dimes were made of standard copper nickel clad. At least, that was the plan. But something strange happened at the Philadelphia Mint that year. A handful of 1971 Roosevelt dimes were struck on leftover 90% silver planchets, likely held over from the early 60s, forgotten in the bins or misfed during a busy production run. These dimes look identical at a glance but weigh slightly more, ring differently when dropped, and have a subtle shine to the trained eye. One such coin lightly circulated, just like this one, was submitted to PCGs by a collector who almost threw it in a Coinstar machine. After testing, weighing, and metallurgical analysis, it was confirmed 90% silver. In 1971, only a few exist, and when it hit the auction block, it brought in a life-changing 612,000. But the silver error isn't the only jackpot lurking in this year. There are also dramatic off-center strike errors from 1971 that can bring in big money, up to $15,000 to $25,000, even in worn condition. These occur when the coin isn't lined up correctly during the minting process, leaving part of the design missing and a blank crescent of metal on the edge. If the date and mint mark are still visible, the value skyrockets. And let's talk about double die obverse errors, where Roosevelt's profile, the words "Liberty" and "In God We Trust," or even the date itself appears slightly doubled or shadowed. These spooky-looking errors are the result of misalignment during the die creation process, and they can make a well-worn dime suddenly worth $10,000 to $40,000, depending on severity and conformation. Then there's the rare transitional planchet strikes. In some cases, dimes were mistakenly struck on leftover blanks from foreign coins the U.S. Mint was producing for other countries at the time. One confirmed 1971 Roosevelt dime was struck on a blank intended for a Guatemalan 10 centavos piece. Wrong color, wrong weight, wrong everything. And yet, completely real. That one sold for $125,000, despite having heavy wear. And here's a twist very few know. Some 1971 dimes have been discovered with misaligned dies, causing Roosevelt's face to appear slanted or shifted to one side. These oddball coins have pulled $8,000 to $12,000, especially when the error is clean and the details are still visible. Now picture this. Someone in 1971 uses this exact coin to buy a cup of coffee. It jingles in a pocket, sits in a drawer, passes through countless hands. 50 years later, it ends up in a coin roll you bring home from the bank. And it turns out to be one of the rare silver strikes or a freak error, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's the magic of this hobby, because every now and then, a dime that looks beaten, boring, and worthless turns out to be a one-of-a-kind mistake that the U.S. Mint never intended to release. Next up, we've got a 1975 Roosevelt dime in circulated condition, a little worn, a little faded, and honestly, easy to overlook. But this specific year hides one of the biggest secrets in all of American coin collecting history. A coin so rare, so mysterious, so outrageously valuable, that most experts believed it didn't even exist, until one showed up, and when it did, it was valued at over $1,000,000. Yes, you heard that right. $1 million for a dime. Let's start with what you're looking at. This 1975 dime has clearly been around the block. Roosevelt's cheek is worn down smooth, the word liberty is soft, and the reverse torch has seen better days. But if you look closely at any 1975 Roosevelt dime, you'll notice something very specific. There's no mint mark. That's normal for 1975 Philadelphia coins. They didn't include a mint mark that year. So, no P, no D, no S, just the date. But what if I told you that a few dimes were minted in San Francisco 1975, with no S mint mark, even though they were supposed to have one? That's the legendary 1975 No S Roosevelt Dime, and it's one of the most elusive and shocking coins ever produced. Here's the story. In 1975, the San Francisco Mint was tasked with striking proof dimes, high-quality coins with mirror-like finishes for collectors. Every one of those should have had a crisp S mint mark on the front. But somehow, a few were struck using proof dies without the mint mark. It was an error so rare, so precise, and so unnoticed that only 2 examples have ever been found. And the first one, it was discovered not by a coin dealer, but by a teenage kid in California flipping through a government-issued proof set. His heart stopped when he realized something was missing. That tiny detail, a missing S, turned his dime into a $1 million treasure. The 1975 No S proof Roosevelt dime has sold for upwards of $456,000 at auction, and experts estimate it could break $1,500,000 if one hits the open market again. That's for a 10-cent coin with one small minting error. It's often called the holy grail of modern dimes. Now, while this specific dime in circulated condition isn't a proof coin, it still shouldn't be ignored. Because in the frenzy that followed the No S discovery, collectors began hunting all 1975 dimes, looking for oddities, off-center strikes, missing clad layers, misaligned dies, and foreign planchet errors. One such 1975 Roosevelt dime struck on a foreign blank, possibly intended for a Panamanian coin. Weighed less, looked strange, and sounded completely different. It sold at auction for $78,000, even in heavily circulated condition. Why? Because it wasn't supposed to exist. Another circulated 1975 dime with a clear double die obverse, where "In God We Trust" and "Liberty" had a ghost-like doubling, pulled in $32,000 after grading. And strong off-center strikes? If the date and part of Roosevelt's face are still visible, those can go for $5,000 to $15,000, even in rough shape like this one. And here's something few people know. Due to the Mint's focus on proof sets that year, many of the regular 1975 strikes from Philadelphia came out weak, leading to soft details and misstrikes. Some of those understruck coins, especially if they show clear planchet issues, are now selling for $8,000 to $20,000 depending on the grade and error type. So don't toss that old 1975 dime just because it's worn and faded. Look closer, weigh it, check for doubling, examine the edges. You might not have the $1 million No S proof, but even circulated coins from this year have become high-value collector targets. Because this isn't just a dime, it's a chapter in one of the greatest US coin mysteries of all time. Next up, we've got a 1996p Roosevelt dime, and let's be honest, this one's in bad condition. It's seen decades of wear. Roosevelt's face is flattened, the torch on the reverse is barely visible, and the rim is nicked and dulled from years of circulation. It looks like the kind of coin you'd leave in the bottom of a parking meter tray. But this particular year, this particular dime carries a secret that stunned collectors, because in 1996, the same year DVDs were introduced and people were jamming to CDs in their car stereos. The US Mint made a move to honor the Roosevelt Dimes' 50th anniversary, and in doing so, they created one of the most sought-after modern dimes ever struck. Let's break this down. First, the basics. 1996 marked 50 years since the Roosevelt Dime debuted in 1946, replacing the Mercury Dime following FDR's death. To mark the milestone, the US Mint issued a special edition Roosevelt Dime with the W mint mark for West Point, only available in uncirculated coin sets that year. Just 1.457 million of these were made, and they were never released. into general circulation. But here's where things get crazy. Somehow, and to this day, no one knows exactly how a few 1996 Roosevelt Dimes escaped into circulation. These weren't supposed to be out in the wild, but a few were spent, found in pocket change, or showed up in rolls. A 10-cent coin that was supposed to be collector only ended up in someone's cash register. And when those were discovered, collectors went berserk. Even in circulated, poor condition, worn nearly flat, just like the one we're looking at. The 1996 dimes have sold for $5,000 to $15,000, depending on the visibility of the mint mark. That tiny little W under Roosevelt's neck is the difference between a toss-away dime and a down payment on a new car. But that's not all. The 1996 Roosevelt Dime itself, even outside the West Point story, has shown up with some of the most shocking mint errors in modern coinage. One known example was struck on a copper penny planchet, resulting in a dime-sized coin with the red tone of a cent, missing outer cladding, and incomplete details. Even in beat-up shape, that bizarre coin sold for $82,000 at auction. Because it was a minting fluke of the highest level. Another 1996 was discovered with a broadstrike error, where the collar that normally holds the coin's shape failed, resulting in a wide, warped dime with an eerie, melted appearance. That coin, found in a bankroll, mind you, sold for $9,800, despite heavy wear and damage. It was authenticated as a true broadstrike by PCGs, and yes, double denomination errors have been reported for 1996 as well. One of the most jaw-dropping, a 1996 Roosevelt Dime struck over a struck Lincoln cent, where both designs were partially visible on a single coin. That hybrid Frankenstein dime sold privately for over $225,000. And then there are the missing clad layer errors again. A visible copper core, reddish surface, often mistaken for a dirty or damaged coin. But when verified, they've pulled in $30,000 to $50,000. And the 1996 is one of the most targeted dates for this specific error. So even if your 1996 dime looks rough, dull, and worthless, don't count it out. Check for weight. Look for color differences. Hold it under the light for signs of doubling, weak strikes, or odd edges. Because one tiny imperfection, one overlooked mint mark, or one strange planchet could turn that beat-up coin into a massive payday. Finally, we arrive at the 1967 Roosevelt Dime, a coin from a turbulent time in American history. The Vietnam War was raging, civil rights protests filled the streets, and in the middle of it all, the U.S. Mint was quietly producing hundreds of millions of dimes, one of which may just be worth more than $700,000. That's right. A small, worn-out, 10-cent coin from 1967, just like the circulated one we're looking at now, could be hiding one of the most valuable minting mistakes ever made. Let's start with a bit of context. In 1967, the U.S. Mint was still adjusting to the huge change made just 2 years earlier, the elimination of silver from dimes and quarters. From 1965 onward, all new dimes were made with the copper core, clad in nickel. But during this transition period, chaos at the mint meant that strange things slipped through the cracks. And in 1967, they really slipped. Now, take a close look at this 1967 dime. It's definitely seen better days. Roosevelt's face is worn smooth, the torch on the back is faint, and the rim is dinged and darkened. Most people wouldn't give this coin a second glance. But in this exact year, the U.S. Mint did something they hadn't done in decades, and it led to one of the rarest dimes in American history. You see, 1967 was one of only 2 years in modern times where the mint didn't put any mint marks on coins, no P, D, or S. The idea was to discourage hoarding. But in that confusion, a few dimes were struck using the wrong planchet, silver blanks that were never supposed to be used. That's right. A 1967 Roosevelt Dime struck on a 90% silver planchet. And when that coin was finally discovered and authenticated, It sent shockwaves through the collecting world. One lightly circulated example, just a bit sharper than this one here, sold at auction for an unbelievable $705,000. Only a handful of these silver-era dimes are believed to exist. They were likely struck using leftover 1960 for silver blanks that somehow got mixed into the mint's clad supply. It was never supposed to happen, but it did, and now every 1967 dime is under the microscope. But silver isn't the only mistake that made this year's dimes incredibly valuable. There are also double die errors, with visible doubling on the words "Liberty," "In God We Trust," or even Roosevelt's eye and nose. In circulated condition, these can pull $12,000 to $25,000 and more if the doubling is strong. One of the most stunning finds was a broadstrike error 1967 dime with no rim and a stretched-out appearance discovered in pocket change. That one, worn and scratched, but undeniably authentic, still sold for $9,500. Another was struck on a foreign planchet, believed to be from a South American coin, and weighed just slightly less than a normal dime. That one was authenticated and sold for $63,000, despite having heavy wear and scratches. And then there are missing clad layer dimes coins that look copper red or uneven in color due to a manufacturing flaw. These oddballs from 1967 have shown up at auctions with price tags ranging from $15,000 to $40,000, even in coins that look downright ugly. But the most jaw-dropping story of all? A 1967 Roosevelt dime with a double denomination strike struck over a Jefferson nickel was authenticated by NGC and sold privately for over $400,000. That coin looked like something out of science fiction, Roosevelt's face overlapping with Monticello, with both dates clashing on a single, ghostly surface. So don't ignore the old coins in your drawer, especially not the plain, mint-mark-free 1967 dimes. They could be among the rarest of the rare, and even in circulated, dirty, beat-up condition, they might be hiding a minting error worth more than your retirement account, because sometimes the most normal-looking coin is the one that breaks every rule, every expectation, and every record.